Hey, Kalle, great to be here with you. I've been obviously a huge fan of your work for such a long time. So honestly, this kind of feels like getting to chat with a bit of a celebrity in our space. So I've always been such a huge Chronoglide nerd, so kind of blowing my mind right now.
Well, so nice to hear, but you got an excellent channel as well.
I appreciate that. It's a couple years in the making. Admittedly, I don't post as much as I used to, but I always love your videos. I love your live streams. How you show the real side of professional watchmaking. And as much as I enjoy practicing the technical side of the space, I love peeking into your workshop every chance I can get.
And it's so nice to hear because for over 8 years now, we've been doing live streams. I started at Twitch and I was a bit slow making the conversion to YouTube. But the only thing I do is talk into four cameras and the feedback is just in the chat. So the feedback now coming from you, it's so nice to hear.
I mean, I really liked your old workshop too, and then seeing you move into the new one, and the amazing space that you've produced, especially the front end bit that you have with highlighting some of the really older, beautiful tools, really works of art at this point, but still functional if you ever needed to dust them off.
And we use them. There is a cigar shop here in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And the whole interior, when you walk in, it's all Art Deco 1930s. And even if you hate cigars, when you walk into that shop, you fully understand why other people are into that, the whole experience. It's like an immersive experience. And what I try to do is when you walk into the workshop here, watches are not just about a battery or just a quick fix. There is so much more, and you've got a lot of experience in the real old watches and other kinds of escapements, and just the knowledge of there is more than it's got nothing to do with looking what time it is. It's so much more than that. The whole tradition of watchmaking.
It is truly, like you said, it is a tradition, and it's. I love how you built. It's not just a career for you, but it really is a passion. So, what is it that actually fuels your passion for watchmaking?
I think it's a bonus that I started on a later age. I knew what I wanted to be when I grow up, when I was 36. This is my third career, if you can call it that. I started in the mid 90s on oil rigs offshore, and I made X-rays of welding if it isn't cracked or air bubbles inside, so it can break. So a lot of my metallurgy experience still comes from that period. And then I was asked to work in IT. A command center for cell phones nationwide. So if there's an outage, we were the directors. You go there, wait for them. What is happening? So really had to find out what was going on. And then my daughter was born in 2007, and I wanted something else. Always on the road, and well, baby girl. And I'm quite fond of old timers, of Rover P5B saloon, and clock dashboard clock wasn't functioning, and I went to a clockmaker, not too far from here, and he was so incredibly rude that it's a car clock. This isn't a normal clock. What are you doing here? He was really rude. I try to be nice now. And then I went to a watchmaker and he was equally rude, but this is not a watch. What are you doing here? Wasting my time. Rah, rah. So, okay, I'll do it myself. Well, I got always worked in technical professions, technical background. So I'm going to do it myself. And did my homework, watched videos, bought books, and then working on a timepiece. It was just fascinating, and especially when it worked and I found what was wrong with it. Well, it was under my skin and never left. So I am a professional watchmaker for only 15 years now. So that's why I'm still quite well new in the game. I've got colleagues who are 30 years professional watchmakers, but that's why I still got some enthusiasm and the love for the craft and the tradition. And well, I'm quite into history. So all the old books, we've got books here from the 17th century about watchmaking and from to until now. So the tradition, and there is so much to learn, way too much for just one person. So if you share your knowledge and experience, we all gonna grow from there. It's my view.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I agree with that sentiment. And yeah, cheers.
Watchmaker fuel.
Yes. And I actually, my day job is also in IT. I run a couple of departments in financial services, and I feel like watchmaking really balances me out, honestly. The story of how I got into it is also kind of on accident as well. I was training for a big race, and I would do my runs in the woods at night, and I stumbled upon a piece of metal that was kind of sticking in the corner of the stream bed, and I pulled it out, and it was an old Waltham pocket watch from the 1800s, and it was, way too far gone, but that really started the itch of how does it work. I found a couple others online I wanted to tinker with, and then from there, a couple of small Amazon purchases later, I was hooked. But I think the oldest watch I worked on is maybe from the 1750s. And to truly appreciate how watchmaking is really one of those crafts in my mind that, you could do great things with hand tools in candlelight, as early as the 1600s, maybe earlier than that. But then you blend it with some of the new tech of the 21st century. So, really, depending on my mood, I can repair old things in old ways, like with some of these machines back here, or, repair old things in modern ways or new things in new ways. And there's so much vastness in the space that, you can really, lose yourself in a good way in all the different technology and advancements and escapement designs and complications and different repeaters, the quarter repeaters, minute repeaters, the moon phases, perpetual calendars. It's something that is, you never really stop learning, and the progression is something that I personally get hooked on.
Yeah. And if you have to pick one thing, what is the thing that you really think that it's such a shame that your client or the user of the watch never fully grasp how beautiful or how great it is?
I try to make a point to capture the movement in its fully clean, restored, and running state, because oftentimes they'll hand me their watch, like the one of the rusted Rolexes that I repaired. Definitely not as far gone as the cow, but it was almost as bad. But the trade-offs in whether to use an aftermarket part versus a genuine part, and then what it looked like at the end, and how it still had a little bit of the patina from the parts that were kept, and some of those close-up views, and then to screw on a non-display case back to hide everything. It's such a shame, and it really deserves to be brought forward. How a watch that 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, or 200 years old still has the beauty. But I think most of my clients do appreciate the fact that it's a vintage watch, it's an antique. They love the history behind it, the family connection that most of my clients are looking to pass things on as heirlooms. So I think they do hold that appreciation that maybe the general population doesn't have, where if it doesn't keep time within 2 seconds a month like a quartz watch does, something's wrong with it.
Yeah, yeah. I just love the insanity in horology, that the finishing and the insane finishing, even 100, 200 years ago, It's got nothing to do with functionality, but it's just being proud of your job and losing yourself and making it nicer, making it more shiny, making it even more nicer. And there is no practical use for it, but just the love for what you're doing.
You touch on that a lot in your book, and I did read through your book, Watchmaking Explained. Everything you need to know as a watchmaker, but no one is telling you. And there's so much I'm really excited to talk about, both from the technical side and also just kind of maybe start with how you approached, what motivated you to put a book like this together, and who's it really for?
Like I said, when I was working on the dashboard clock of my Rover, I just got under my skin. So I went to the Dutch watchmaking school and did the training there. And then wanted to, well, make it a career choice and bought all the books. And there are excellent books like Watchmaking from George Daniels. It's just the best. But it's the artisanal side of making parts for watches. And then there's the theory of horology, the pink books, beautiful books. But it's far more the theory of horology with formulas and nothing really practical how to start your workshop. Well, this is quite professional, but even if you are working in a spare bedroom or in the attic or whatever, how do you get started? And just the practical knowledge, it just wasn't there. So I basically just wrote the book I wanted to have when I was starting. And well, I'm 52 at the moment, but especially here in the Netherlands and probably in other places as well. The average age is quite high, over 50. And I think within 5 years, the amount of watchmakers here in the Netherlands is going to be half because of retirement. So if all that knowledge is lost, and well, now for me, only 15 years, but for others, maybe 30 years or longer, you have to write it down and make it an sharing experiences because, like I just said, there's so much to know. There is a revision. Well, a watch isn't functioning anymore, so or needs maintenance. So disassembly, cleaning apart, assembly. There is repair. Something is wrong. But then if you disassemble the watch, clean all the parts and putting it back together, the watch is probably still isn't running. The defect is still there. And then there is restoration, making the parts. Well, we like restoration, and for us, the best compliment is if the client doesn't see which part we made because it blend in with all the rest. And we like to use older machines for it, all from the 1950s, 40s. And the machines you maybe seen in the introduction in the shop are from the oldest is 1929, the straight engine for decorating dials and stuff. We just love the authentic way of restoration, so no CNC, no computer aided guide, but just making the parts ourselves. Yeah, and that is just experience. But if a watchmaker or any profession even has got just about a 5 year gap, all the old information is gone if people are retiring or stopping. And if there's a fresh generation, a new generation in a profession, it's so hard. It takes years and years and years just to gain that experience that was there already, but then was gone. So yeah, I wrote a book, the book I wanted to read when I was starting, and there are so many pitfalls and easy mistakes to make that can kill your love for watchmaking. And it's so easy with a bit of experience and information in the book. Um, you won't make that rookie mistakes, and hopefully the love for horology will still be there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think you even mentioned in the first section of the book, might have been the second chapter. It was really one of those fields where the more experience you gain, the more you realize how much more there is to learn. So you think you do something amazing, like, when I made a balance staff for the first time, and it was a long time in the making before I even got to that point, I felt pretty good. And then, I go back and I read some of George Daniels' work, or maybe I listen to a lecture by Bernhard Litterer, and, well, by the way, I guess I need to know how to work on remontoire égalités, but but really it reminds me how much more there is out there. And, that's what I love about it. I mean, tackling that next challenge. But I like how there's the way you laid out the book. It's really geared towards, you're starting out, whether you're an amateur or professionally trained, you want to potentially take on clients. It really sets the expectations of, practically how you get going, what tools are really necessary to get going, how to set up your workshop to be effective, the organization, the intake of the work, how you keep track of it, the customer communications. These are things that, that's really the part of what no one really tells you about it. Like, you could be the best technician, you could be the best restorer, you can have all the shiniest tools, but if your organization's not there, if you've got parts randomly scattered about your workshop in random drawers and buckets and bins, you are not going to be successful in the long term, and you're going to get burned out, and really will kill the passion. So, I like how you really laid that out. I also really love the kind of the uniqueness of how you've designed the QR codes throughout the book. The takeaway videos, I love how the ones that you're recording them in a very intimate setting in that kind of front part of your workshop. It's almost like you're sitting in a library, and I'm just sitting there with a cup of coffee, listening to kind of you expand on a lot of these topics. And I like to say this is really the first book I've read that accepts over-the-air updates because you continue to add as time goes on. So the book will continue to be relevant for years to come.
That's what we really do hope. And it's written like you're an apprentice here in the workshop, and I'm just talking to you. No fancy words, just conversational, and that makes it so much easier just to get a point across. And I'm not a native speaker, so it was so much easier for me just to write it like that and make it really entry level. But at the end, and especially with the QR codes, if I write a text from first, I started writing, I think about 10 years ago, what I wanted to do, because the book wasn't there. And at the meantime, I was a teacher in the Dutch watchmaking school. And so I started to write like a teacher. You should do this, you should do that. All the other things are wrong. But that isn't the way. So deleted it all, start all over again. And now conversational, you could try this. And maybe if you try that, you are more successful. And if you put it in a text, first screw A, then screw B, it doesn't work because there are so many calibers over the decades, centuries even. So with the QR codes and the over 100 videos, it's so much more easier to point out, try that one, then that one, and maybe if there's another design or movement, you start with that one and then that one. And if you try to capture that in text, it would be unreadable and so incredibly boring. So then the whole purpose of the book is out of the window.
Yeah, like you said, there are countless service manuals out there, and it's not meant to be read like a service manual. It's not meant to be read like a step-by-step repair guide to troubleshoot the depthing of the pallet stone and the escapement. It's really not meant for that. There are texts out there where people can go and read about that, sure. But what those texts don't really talk about is at the high level, the overall and general approach to make someone successful. Like, for example, you have a chapter on smart assembly. I don't even think Henry Freed went into, in his book, just the general concept of like break apart the watch into its functional subassemblies, right? You troubleshoot the issues sooner before moving on as each function tends to depend on the one that came before it. So, I mean, it's the same with modern software development, where incrementally testing along the way is a lot better, right? The later you find a defect, the more expensive it is to fix, whether it's time or cost or, whatever it is. So, I don't know of any, deep technical book that really goes into that kind of guide that yours does. So I really appreciate that call out.
Oh, nice to hear. Thank you. I wrote a bit more about the human side of watchmaking and how you approach things, and once you get a hang of it, and it's a career choice, and you start working or having clients. At that point, it's so hard to change for the long term. So you just start organically, and you do it well because I've started like this, but it's not sustainable for the long run. So if you just sit down and think about just the early stages, what do I want? What do I don't want? How are clients gonna try to rip you off? But that is gonna happen. All the things, if you start thinking about that in front, all the bad habits, all the short-term solutions for long-term problems. Once you get that settled, you free to grow in a sustainable way as a workshop. And even if it's a hobby, people are going to find you because the amount of watchmakers is getting less and less and less. The amount of work is insane, just with all the mechanical watches, mechanical movements, all the, like you just said, the heirlooms, all mechanical watches. You need an experienced watchmaker to repair a mechanical watch. And so we do need the watchmakers, men, women. The age is, if I talk about a new generation of watchmakers, it's got nothing to do with age, just fresh blood. And if we lose that new generation for silly mistakes and rookie mistakes that can kill your enthusiasm for the craft, there's not nearly enough hands on deck for all the work that's got to be done.
I think that the part of the book that talks about learning when to say no, it's the hardest lesson to learn, right? Especially for a hobbyist, right? I'm not in this as a business, right? I'm not running like a business. I'm trying to think of like return on my time and things like that. It's so like, how do I say no to taking on some grandmother's pendant cylinder escapement that, those are really the hardest ones to get running again. But do I not like a challenge? But then again, I've got, months of backlog, right? And so the backlog itself gives me anxiety, and I have to control that. And so I need to learn how to say no. And I've started to do that, and it's disappointing because it's an heirloom, right? So, how do you know when to turn someone away and how to do that gracefully is a real challenge.
And we call it making money by saying no, because of course the challenge is nice and you can see it as gaining experience, but if the watch doesn't run perfectly, especially with a cylinder escapement pendant, those are horrible. They weren't even accurate when they're brand new. So now they are 100 years old and worn for 60, 70, 80 years, and then put in a chest of drawers because it's broke for 20 years. There is no way you get paid, but more importantly, and I really do mean that, there is no way you get a satisfied customer or client. And it keeps returning, keeps coming back, and there is no, you don't need that aggravation. But if it's an expensive hobby or profession, if you want to make money, you have to have happy clients and finish jobs. That's it. And so some tasks, some projects, it is just not worth it for yourself, for the client. Even, of course, I understand the emotional value, but sometimes you just have to say no, just to protect yourself and your business and your good name, your reputation.
Yeah, I think you've said in your videos before where, the worst case scenario is you take a watch that's not running and it ends up still being a watch that's not running. If it's really too far gone, and what's the worst that could happen? I mean, I've done that before where I've like, let me give it a try, right? I'll time box it. I'm gonna limit myself. I'm only gonna spend this many hours on it. I don't really know that I'm gonna be able to do this. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's worth it, but like you said, you do that too much, you start burning yourself out. You spend hours and hours on end on some of these watches. But so, yeah, I really enjoyed the book. I understand you're working on another one called Watch Restoration Explained. What kind of areas are you choosing to focus on with that one?
This is for the current book, Watchmaking Explained, is for starting watchmakers and more experienced watchmakers, and it's more about knowledge sharing. And it's 280 pages with over 100 QR codes, so over 100 videos, and we are putting some more information with PDFs there as well via the QR code. But it's for watch repair. And the next step, the next logical step, is watch restoration, making parts, adjusting parts. That's got nothing to do, or it's not really needed for the repair and for the starter. But if you're more advanced, it is watch restoration explained. And we would like to have it finished by May 2026. And that is making screws, bluing hands, the lathe, the bigger lathe, the milling machines, the small watchmaker lathe, the maintenance of the machines itself, how to make parts, how to start, all the engravers, all stuff like that. Cutting wheels, hobbing wheels, it's a different procedure for making the wheels, making the teeth, all stuff like that. It's a bit more advanced, and that is the experience, the practical experience makes it then so much easier to make parts yourself, because, well, vintage watches, at that time when the watch was new, a certain amount of extra parts were produced for replacing over the years. Nobody ever thought that watches will still be repaired 70, 80, 150 years later. So the amount of parts, of original parts, are getting less and less and less and less. Everybody is picking from the one heap that there is.
Or they're astronomically expensive as a result.
Especially now. And even 200 years ago, just like you said, it was already possible to make the perfect parts. And it still is. And with restoration, well, we like to do it the authentic way. So no 3D printing and no CNC. But it is doable. Even because 200 years ago, the accuracy of the machines weren't nearly how they are today, and still they were able, with the inaccurate machines, to make accurate parts. And that's a journey into history and the practical. So that is the Watch Restoration Explained, the new project. And to be honest, it was so much fun writing this book, because the feedback I get from people asked to read it, this is what I needed. Well, that was the starting point for me as well. This is the book I needed when I started. So the transfer of experience and having the feedback, and I do it like this. Hey, strange, because I learned to do it like this. And that the knowledge sharing and drawing inspiration from other watchmakers, that is just so much fun. If only watchmakers were more like actors or musicians, getting inspired by each other. And what I found, maybe it's a Dutch thing, but maybe it's a watchmaker thing, the putting down and always looking for a defect or that is wrong. Always the finger like this. And if you get inspired by each other, share knowledge, we all grow, and this profession will be here for centuries because the love for horology and the love for the history, how the parts were being produced, how insanely accurate and beautiful it is. That's just lovely to give to the new generation.
I agree. I think that for every type of, we call them the gatekeepers, and that's the case for, whatever the hobby or craft or industry there is. There's always a handful of gatekeepers that it's this is the right way to do it, and you've done this wrong. And but I found for every one of those, there's 4 to 5 folks that are more willing to spend the time and help build you up and say, hey, this is, you can do it this way, and this is the way you chose to do it. But let's see if we can improve upon it and work together and keep fostering that enthusiasm. I think whether you've got 5 years of experience, 40 years of experience, there's always something else to learn. The industry's been around for hundreds of years. What's not to learn? So I have one last question for you. What's on your wrist? Oh no.
No watch yet. We are going to make our own watch here. Every single part made here in the workshop, and that's the watch I'm going to wear, because there is no limit. I've got it here. A simple watch. It is a Frederic Constant. I bought it for 50 euros, dollars. I think it's at home, and it's just a simple watch. Mechanical, but with a ETA 2824 in it.
Oh, the
And that was
workhorse.
the first one I restored. It's got a Rover logo. It was from a Rover dealership, and did some tweaks. It's running about 300 amplitude, and the tweaks is just we call it blueprinting. So every single part perfect, and then again assemble, and then make it even more perfect again. It's a watch for $50, and I'll wear it with pride. And there is no, there's always something more special, especially the watches we get here. They all have emotional value, but if you work on a watch from $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, or even $150,000, there's always something more. So I don't wear watches too often. I got a beautiful, it isn't really valuable, but it's a Rolex pocket watch from the 1940s. And I got it from a client who was so glad with a restoration we did for another watch. So as a gift, he gave me that Rolex pocket watch. And again, it is really not that valuable, but the way he gave it to me and expressed his gratitude, that is a watch I wear quite regularly, and just because of the story and not because it's Rolex or anything. A
Yeah.
lovely memory of a lovely guy.
Absolutely beautiful. I mean, there's so much out there. I think I've probably taken up too much of your time, Kalle. I really
Pleasure.
appreciate, very enlightening conversation. Very much appreciate sitting down with you today. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
This was an
thank you.
honor. Good luck. Glad to hear the book's doing well, and I hope you take care.
Thank you so much, and we keep in touch. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.